There's been reports of new US export controls on AI hardware and software that would apply not only to China, as it often has in the past, but to much of the world. Now, the rules haven't been officially released yet, but what's your understanding of what they might look like?
Of course, at this stage, it's entirely speculative, but this might be the most far reaching round of export controls yet. So, effectively, to break it down, there's going to be three tiers. So, on one end, there's going to be a group of countries, China included, as well as I understand about a dozen or 2 dozen arms embargoed countries. You will not be allowed to sell GPUs to them at all, advanced GPUs. And then there's going to be a tier one of countries. These are close US allies. I believe there are roughly 20 countries. So, for these countries, there will be no restrictions applied. And then there's going to be a band of countries in the middle, effectively the rest of the world, where there's going to be a cap on the number of GPUs that can be sold to those respective countries. I understand the figure currently is roughly 50,000, and these numbers will be from 2025 to 2027. But there's also a little clause where if you're a US hyperscaler and you are able to apply for a validated end user license, you'll be able to get more GPUs above the 50,000.
Some of the big chip companies like Nvidia have already come out with some pretty strongly worded statements opposing these reported new controls. What kind of impact could these controls have on chip makers like Nvidia?
I think just the sheer compliance sort of scaling that'll be required. I mean, countries are already struggling just with export controls targeted narrowly at just China. And now we're looking at a sort of a global expansion of this problem. I mean, countries are already dealing with illicit diversion, transshipment, smuggling issues, shell companies, and now you're basically saying, well, let's multiply this by 150 times. And so this is going to be very difficult and challenging on companies, I think. For China, for example, Nvidia sold or was projected to sell up to a million or 2 million GPUs to just China. And now you think about the rest of these countries, 50,000 is a relatively small number. The largest clusters, single cluster GPU clusters in the US are currently 100,000. So I think it's hard to believe that it will not affect the bottom line.
These new rules would be coming out in what are really the final days of the Biden administration. What's your view on how the incoming Trump administration might handle this? Will they keep these rules in place? Will they make them even more severe? Any predictions?
Now, the Trump question is interesting because many of these export controls actions were initially taken under the Trump administration. I think for China, the real 9/11 moment happened in 2019. Huawei and ZTE had sanctions placed on them. I believe Huawei was forced to get off the Android market as well. So I think it's likely the export controls will continue in some fashion. But for the more expensive ones, the ones that are less business friendly, arguably the upcoming one, it is quite possible that Trump might decide that this is not in the best interest of the business community or doesn't help the competitiveness of companies like Nvidia